Right now we're learning the Dvar Malchut, the speech that the Lubavitcher Rebbe gave in the end of 1991, just a few months, 2 months, 3 months before he had a stroke that rendered him paralyzed, half paralyzed, and he couldn't speak. So these are like the last messages that the Rebbe gave us by speech. Even though when the Rebbe was paralyzed, he used to answer questions. People would ask questions, and his secretaries, especially Rabbi Groner, would read the answers to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe would answer, shake his head. Yes, they would answer 3 times. They ask him 3 times, and he would give the same answer. And there's some very amazing, incredible stories. The most incredible of which is from, I think, Rabbi Bruce Winkin in Florida, that there was a big tornado that came. They asked everybody to move, and he asked the Rebbe if he should move, and the Rebbe said not. The Rebbe this is when the Rebbe was paralyzed, and the Rebbe said he should not move. He should not move. They asked 3 times, should he not move? No. And everyone said, you got to move, you got to get out. And he said, and the Rebbe said no. And in fact, the tornado destroyed. The tornado was going right toward them, and all of a sudden it just turned around. It was no hurricane. Sorry, hurricane. And the hurricane suddenly just diverted its source, and it destroyed everything around them, and it didn't destroy the Chabad house because of the Rebbe's answer. There's a whole video about it. Okay. In any case, now we're talking about things that the Rebbe did say. And the Rebbe here is speaking about Mashiach. And he says the whole world is prepared for Mashiach, and Mashiach, we just have to open up our eyes, and the world is changing. And one of the ways that we can see is that God has spread the Jewish people out through the whole world. And this is a tremendous kindness that God did. Why? Because the purpose that the Jews are in the world is in order to correct the world, that the world should be a perfect place. And this can only be done when the Jewish people do the commandments and learn Torah in various places in the world, to the degree that there's even advantage to the fact that Jews are found in certain places and they learn the language of the place and they do some of the customs of the place. Of course, if it's according to the Torah, it has to be, not in any way opposed to the Torah. For instance, just to give a simple example, Chabad and all these places where they're all in the world, and a lot of these places there's like anti-Semitism, right? Yeah, that's right. Very good. You can look over it. There's anti-Semitism, and Chabad never removed their beards. Chabad always had beard. They don't. Chabad doesn't cut the beard at all. Trim it. No, they don't trim the beard. Even though this draws a lot of attention, and it could be negative attention, and it could be even dangerous. But I've never heard that Chabad incurred any more danger because they had beards or they didn't beard. I mean, there's people where there's just anti-Semitism where they'll beat up anybody that has a kippah on his head or something like that. Anyway, probably there must be some sort of exceptions to what I just said. But however it is, Chabad does not take off their beard. Why don't you take off their beard? Why not? It's a thing that it could everybody. Very rare is people have beards. And here you have religious Jews with beards, because that's a little bit touching on something that's forbidden in the Torah. A little bit. There's all sorts of permissions to remove your beard and everything, but you have to twist it around a little bit in order to show that it's not it's not a bad thing to remove the beard. For everyone agrees it's not a good thing. There's no good in removing your beard. But you have to twist it around to show that there's nothing negative about removing your beard, right? Maybe this, you can do it with a cream, with this. So Chabad never moves but on the other hand, the other things, let's say, for instance, they don't walk around with white stockings and long, they dress like the people over there, wherever the countries where they are, right? Because it's not a forbidden thing to do. And it's not necessarily a bad thing to do. The people want to put on, fur hats and things like that. That's okay. That's a nice thing, and they do it to show that they're Jewish and to stress their Judaism, and it strengthens their Judaism. Is a good thing. But on the other hand, to not do those things is nothing against the Torah. It doesn't weaken your Judaism. That's just an example that I'm giving. So the more that Chabad is spread, the more the Jews are spread around in the world, and they still hold on to their Torah and their commandments, and they act like Jews, and they're proud that they're Jews, is that purifies the place where they're in. Okay, that's what we got up to. I think this is what we got up to. Okay, Alpiz, according to this, so we're looking for signs that Mashiach, that this is the generation of Mashiach. That's what the Rebbe said. This is the last generation of exile and the first generation of the redemption of Mashiach. How do we see this? Alpiz, according to this, we can understand the uniqueness of our generation, the Gabi Doros, regarding to the generations that came before. But Doros Akodmim, in the previous generations, Lo Yibn Israel, the Jewish people were not scattered around so much, like Kitzvei Tevel in all the corners of the world, as they are now. Lo Miboy Bezman Beis Hamikdash, it goes without saying, in the time when the Holy Temple was, all the Jewish people were in the land of Israel or near the land of Israel. Some of them were in Babylon, etc. Even the first generations of the exile after the destruction of the second temple, his Goru Yehudim, the Jewish people, lived only in certain countries. They lived only in the sphere of the globe where the Torah was given, in Europe mostly. In other words, on the same part of the same quadrant, if you want to call it, I don't know if that's the right word, of the globe of the world where Israel is, right? In other words, on the east of the Atlantic Ocean, and west of the Pacific Ocean. I mean, most of the Jews didn't. Also, there was no, in India there were Jews, in China there were Jews. No, the Jews were only in Iraq, Iran. Which is not the case in these generations. Hitpazru ben Israel, the Jewish people were now scattered in many, many countries, right? In America, when only in the last couple hundred years, Jews in America, Canada, Dome America, South America, Brazil, all these places. There were Jews living there. They don't even know how the Incas got there or whatever. Jews for sure weren't living over there in those places. There's Jews living in all these places in Africa. Now there's all these Israelis also even. There's Chabad houses. There's a Chabad house in Kenya. Chabad houses in Ethiopia. Incredible. There's a Chabad houses, of course, in South Africa. There's a lot. Until Gam B'Chetzia Kador Tachton, Jews are living in America on the other side of the world, than where the Torah was given. They were called door of a door. The Torah was given right in the side of the globe where Israel is, on that side. So there was north of it is Europe, right? A little bit south of it was the there were Jews in Morocco and those places, but generally speaking, they were all sort of close to Israel in one way or another. Nowadays, there's Jews in America. There's Jews in every generation. Jews get spread out even more until our generation. There's Jews which are really the ends of the world. And they do Torah and the commandments in a way, and in a way of the customs of the place. They speak in the language of the place, right? There's Portuguese and Spanish, and in Japan there's until most of still there's even institutions of Torah and commandments in all these places. If you think about this even for one moment, as we can see the tremendous advantage of our generation and regarding the previous generations, that we are purifying the world in every single country. Now here we have a subject that's very interesting. What happens when a Jew learns Torah, does a commandment? What happens when a Jew does? It's not just a ritual like anything that'll give you another whatever it is a brownie point or whatever they call it to get into heaven, right? A Boy Scout point, whatever it is. That you did another commandment and now I'm going to go to heaven, right? I did the commandment even though it was difficult and now I'm going to go to heaven. This is giving me putting another coin in my celestial bank. I didn't want to say piggy bank. Good. Okay, that could be true. That could be true. Certainly, if you do Torah and commandments, it certainly gives you, a benefit and reward in the world to come. That's 100%. But that's not what we're stressing here. We're stressing something much, much greater. When you do a commandment in this world, it's like you're building a little holy temple. And even though the commandment is very temporary, that's what you think it's temporary. But the fact is, it draws infinity into this world. It makes the world infinitely real at that moment that you're doing the commandment. And when we say infinite is beyond time also. So it seems to you it's within that moment, but really you're bringing infinity into the physical world. Okay, we don't have any conception of what infinity is. And like we just finished learning, we don't even know what the proper organ of perception is to perceive this big change that's happening in the world when we do commandments. But the fact is, that's what the Rebbe is trying to say, and that's the fact of Judaism, and that's the fact what Hasidus is trying to bring into the world, that when a Jew does a commandment, or when a Jew learns Torah, and he does it for the sake of God, right? He does it because he's a Jew, is that brings godliness into the world. That brings godliness into the world. And at some point, there's going to be the quantum mass of godliness is going to be, then the whole thing is going to flip over. The whole world will become a wonderful, beautiful place, and we'll start to see the Creator in the creation. We'll start to see that the world is such a meaningful place. Meanwhile, the Jews are spread out in all these different countries, and they're doing commandments, even one commandment. Like we said before, therefore, according to all the signs, all of these refinements and purifications have been finished, are removed, so we can understand moving as Madua Ochasim Kavar, why we are already in the redemption. We're already in the steps of the future redemption, that the whole entire world will be totally fixed up. Dalit. Benuyim, everything is built in a way of klolim upratos, klolos upratos. Everything there is in the world, there's the generality and the details. Everything, right? I want to buy a car. That's the generality. No, you have to have money, where you're going to go, you have to take lessons, you know how to drive, what type of car are you going to buy, you have to get insurance, that's all the details. But there's the generality. Everything in the world is like that. Everything in the world, there's a generality of it, and then there's the details. And now that we said before, the Shleimus Biru Olam, that we said that the world has already been refined and purified. This Mishtakef B'Yuchad, this is especially, we can see, that's the generality. Now let's have a details, a little more details. France. What do we say? One of the signs that the world is ready for Moshiach and is being prepared for the Moshiach, and that the redemption is already, it's already, we finished the bad, now we're just going into the good. What's the sign of this? That Judaism is spread out to the whole world. Says the Rebbe, let's take one example, France. We talked about this last week. One of the goals of the future redemption, we learned last week. It says, about France. Right, last week, remember, we had the entire book of Ovadia, the entire book of the prophet Ovadia is one chapter. And it talks about over there in Galut Hachel Azeh Livnei Israel, this exile that we're in will be ended ad Sarfat, and even France. Yershu et Arya Negev, and that we will conquer the cities of the south. But Olu Moshim, and then finally it ends up that after that happens, Olu Moshim Bahar Tzion, that the saved ones, the Jewish people that have been saved from all the exile, they'll come to Har Tzion, to the mountain of Zion, Lishpodet Har Esav, and then they will judge the mountain, the power of Esav. The power of Esav basically is the church. So the Jews, all the Jews will be gathered from all the world. They'll all be gathered to Israel, the Holy Land. And then all the idolatry that's in the world will be judged. What does it mean it'll be judged? That it'll be taught. What's wrong with it? Right? It'll be what's wrong with it. Everybody will have the chance, and everyone will grab at the opportunity to stop their idolatrous practices and worship only the creator of the universe. That's what's going to happen. How it says one of the big signs is that France has been refined. It says, then Hashem la Hashem Malucha, then God will have the rulership. God will rule the whole world. But we have to understand, that the fact, Shanavi Mefaret, that the Galus, that the prophet, he details the exile and the redemption of France, that France becomes refined. That's what Ovadia says, right? Moving, so it's understood. Shekayem Sheikhos, there's a special connection between them. Shahari, because behold, afilu im batchalat galut, even at the beginning of the exile, Huglu Yehudim, there were Jews that were taken into France, right? What's his name? Rashi was in France. Lamai Nafkamina, what's so special about France? And especially Yehud, that it says that France, not at the beginning, Lobat Chalata Galut, Lifnei Kamad Alpayim Shana, but Geula, we're talking about France is redeemed. This is like one of the big signs of the redemption. France. The Jews were in a lot of different places. They were in Germany. They were in a lot of places. Why France? Mizeh moving. So from this, it's understood that the future redemption, Nogea, Adavar, it is very essential, Shehu Kashura, that somehow or other it is connected with France. And that this terrible exile that we're in, the beginning of the exile, Hechil also means to begin. It was in France. Why France? I thought it was Babylon. Didn't we go to Babylon? What about Rome? Huh? What about Rome? That was really the source of it, wasn't it? I just finished saying the church and this, that's Rome, that's Edom. Why France? The reason is the complete refinement of the world, where we'll see that God will be the ruler. This is by means of refining of the Jewish people in France. Okay, let's understand first of all the difference between the relationship of the Jewish people in our generation to France, how it was to how the relationship of the Jewish people was in the generation of the Alter Rebbe. Now, the Alter Rebbe, the first Rebbe of Chabad, he was in the time of Napoleon. He was in the time of Napoleon. And Napoleon was conquering the whole world in the time of the first Rebbe of Chabad. Yadu, it's known, Shebetakufel Admor Zaken, in the time of the Alter Rebbe, Shepartza Milchama ben Napoleon, the French Napoleon, Atzorer, Alexander, and the Tsar, Alexander, the Russian. As Sober Admor Zaken, the Alter Rebbe thought, not like all the other Gadol Echad Acher B'Yisrael, not like other great leaders of Israel, the great the scholars, Shetovat Mitzvah Maruchni Shel Bnei Yisrael, V'Inyan Yiras Shamayim, that because of the benefit of the Jewish people fearing God and loving God, it's better that Russia should win the battle and that France should be defeated. Now, all the other leaders of Israel, almost all of them, we're talking about great Talmud Torah scholars and Hasidic scholars, they all favored Napoleon. They were all right. They were all correct. And the Alter Rebbe agreed with them. He said that if Napoleon wins, it'll raise the glory of the Jewish people. There'll be freedom to learn Torah, to do commandments, but there'll also be freedom to leave Torah and to leave commandments. That the French and a Frenchman and a Jew will be the same. No difference. So the Alter Rebbe said, if France wins, it'll raise up the glory of the Jewish people physically, but spiritually, it'll be a catastrophe. So it's better that Russia should rule. Now, Russia was the fanatically Russian Orthodox. It's this type of Christianity. It's not, anyway, that's Russia. Fanatic. And Christianity, as we know, is idolatry. And Napoleon was a free thinker. He was an atheist, basically. He said, you want to believe, you can believe. So strangely, the Alter Rebbe favored the idolatry of the Russian government over, and the Russians, they made every effort possible to make the Jews, that's the essence of Christianity, to destroy Judaism, to make all the Jews their religion. Eventually they had the Cantonistim and they inducted them into the army. And France, exactly the opposite. He said everybody can do what they want to. But Lashon HaKodesh, he says, Im Yinatzeach, Napoleon Bonaparte, this is Bonaparte, that was his name. If Napoleon Bonaparte wins, Yarbe Osher Yisrael, there will be riches in the Jewish people, the Yoren Kerem Yisrael, and it'll raise the glory of the Jewish people. Although Yispardu Yisrachu Liban, but it will be separated, their hearts of the Jews, Miavim Shebeshamayim, from their Father in heaven. Aleph, if Alexander wins, only, even though the Jewish people will become poor, Yishpal Keren Yisrael, and our glory will be cast to the ground. The Jewish people will be attached, their hearts will be attached to their Father in heaven. And that's the main thing. The reason for this was, Tzarfat, France, Napoleon was the head. Yitzagu az tenua shel chofesh. It was freedom. Mikol yenidat, from anything dealing with God or faith in God. No connection to God. But klipazu, with this, shel Malchut Tzarfat, with France, the kingship, the rulership of kingdom of France, of the king of France, Shavayato, et tokif a klipa v'adin akasha, that it says Napoleon, he was the ultimate egotism. He was the ultimate aspect of klipa. If he would win, it would show that egotism and atheism are victorious. Machmas agaiva, ageut v'itnasut, litlot lismoch al kocho v'gvurato. That his whole thing was, I'm depending on myself. Anybody who knows a little bit of history, and that's me, I know a very little bit of history, but Napoleon, he had these incredible victories in the beginning. And he beat armies that were greater than him, and he had these amazing tactics of war tactics. He was basically a soldier, Napoleon. He was the head of of cannons. Cannons, there was like missiles back then. And he knew how to move the cannons and where to shoot and everything. It was incredible, the victories that he made. And so his whole thing was egotism. Lomer, to say kochi v'yotzev yodi, to say my power and my energy, misalik hashkacha amuna, that I don't need God. There's no godliness and everything. The Tsar, and the Tsar, on the other hand, they believed in God. They believed in God. Maybe they believed in God through idolatry, through this person, whatever, but still they believed that there's a power, a superior power to them. This is something like with the story with Sennacherib. Sennacherib, he laid siege to the Jerusalem, and he said, no one can defeat me, and all of a sudden, that he was fallen. Like the middle of Rebbe, the second Rebbe was explained. This was not something temporary. It wasn't just one political thing, Napoleon against Alexander, but it was the atheism, anti-theism against belief in God. This is relevant to all times and etc. If you do it like it's known, but in the history of the Jewish people, in the history of the world, that the French Revolution in the year Tov Kuf Mem Tet, this was what? 1789, the French Revolution. That by means of that, afterwards came Napoleon, Kavur Mispar Shanim, after a few years, Napoleon became the leader of France. This was a ideological revolution. It changed the whole world. The French Revolution changed the whole entire world. And this was one of the main events. The French Revolution was one of the foundations of the modern world that we have, and tarbut, and this tremendous dependence and, elevation and worship of culture. To this very day. Until before this French Revolution, the French government and almost all the countries in the world, they were in the hands of a king. There was a king or a queen. And then the king and the queen, they did whatever they wanted to. This revolution was based on the thing that everyone's a king, that people are free and they can do whatever they want to. And therefore they deposed the king and the queen in order to free the country, shlitatam, from the rulership of the king. And the country will go over to the people. The people, by the people, for the people. What was the French saying? French saying, liberty, fraternity, equality. Everybody's going to be equal. No more kings. Even though there's good things about this, that by bringing freedom physically, and also people there's more, the justice and honesty. You're not depending on the king. If the king is bad, then the whole thing is the Dvar Hashem and the word of God mevi. I'm about Dvar. I'm sorry. And this could have brought freedom and richness to the Jewish people. That's what the Alter Rebbe said. If Napoleon wins, that is going to raise up the financial and the physical status of the Jewish people. Because it's based on this it was not based on faith in God, then this brought with it, and especially by means of Napoleon, a whole gisha, an attitude, an approach of chafesh beruchnius, that spirituality becomes secondary. It serves only the physical. Chafesh ben yenidat. You want to be religious, you can do it. It's a psychological thing. Religion is a psychological thing. The main thing is your physical welfare. Uprikas ol v'hefkeros. If so, this brought to unbounded decadence. Davar shehishpia al od kama v'kama medinos, and this eventually brought many countries afterwards. Mitamzeh, because of this, the Alter Rebbe, he was opposed to France, and he even prayed that they would lose the war. And in fact, they did lose the war because of his prayers. Ad kedei kach, that because of this, the siruv liyot tachat sheltonov, that he didn't want to be under the rulership of Napoleon, as the Alter Rebbe, he ran away. Him and all of his household, they ran away from Liadi. Napoleon had no intention to kill the Jews. He was not an anti-Semite. He didn't target the Jews. Nevertheless, the Alter Rebbe ran away from the other religious Jews welcomed him. That was one of the reasons that the Alter Rebbe passed away. Bekar Piena and Kaftal Tevis. That's going to be in the next month. The Alter Rebbe promised, he swore to his son, the second Rebbe, Ad Kedei Shavua, he made an oath that Russia will win the war. Napoleon was winning the war. He was conquering city after city, place after place, and it was obvious he was going to win. And everyone was, all the religious people were happy. But the Alter Rebbe was very, very, very worried. And he ran away, and his son said, what's going to be? Look, he's winning place after place. And the Rebbe said, I swear to you, and I promise you that he is going to lose the war. And so it was, totally against all the prophecies and the predictions of everybody else. Al Yedekach, by means of this, then the Jewish people were saved from total assimilation. In Tzarfat, that would have been if France would have conquered Russia, because the majority of the Jews were living in Russia. B'nai Yisrael, the Jewish people, then they could continue their service to come closer to their Father in heaven, and especially by means of Chassidut in this country, by means of our rabbis, the leaders of Chabad, and especially Admor Zaken. And so we see that the Alter Rebbe had a tremendous, he's even sent spies to spy on Napoleon, because Napoleon didn't suspect that there would be religious people that would be against him. And he sent a spy, and Napoleon, as soon as he came in, he suspected this person. His name was Rabbi Moshe Meislis. He suspected him that he was a thief. Napoleon was a sorcerer. He had tremendous supernatural powers. Napoleon. The Alter Rebbe, the first Rebbe, was tremendously afraid of him. When the Alter Rebbe ran away from Napoleon, as he had his house, he ordered that his house be burnt down, so that Napoleon wouldn't get a hold of anything that he owned, any possession of the Alter Rebbe's, because he knew that he could put a spell. He could put a spell, and he could make trouble for the Alter Rebbe spiritually. It says, like Moses was afraid of Paro, same thing, right? So therefore, we see that that now that France has now become, there's Jews that are becoming religious in France, then this is an amazing thing, as we're going to talk about more, God willing, tomorrow. Now we're going to do the Yom Yom. Let's do the Yom Yom. Sorry, 1 second. The Tzemach Tzedek writes, the love expressed in Imcha lo chafatzti, this is, I don't want anything except for you. Right? King David said it in the Psalms. Here it is, Psalms 73. Means that a person should desire nothing except for God, not heaven, not earth, not the higher heaven, the lower heaven. All these were created with just one letter of God's name, the letter Yud. The love should be directed only to God, to the very essence of God. This was actually expressed by my teacher, the first Rebbe of Chabad. Whenever he was praying, they would hear him say, I want nothing at all. I don't want your heaven. I don't want your world to come. I want only you. Good Yom Tov. Tonight is Yud Tet Kislev. May you be inscribed and sealed for a good year in the study of Chassidut and in the ways of Chassidut. Good Yom Tov. Lashana Tova, B'limud Chassidut, B'darki Chassidut. Tonight is Yud Tet Kislev, the holiday of holidays. I'm wishing you all a happy and a successful and a meaningful Yud Tet Kislev, that we should take any idea that there is in Chassidut Chabad to heart, and this will change you and the whole area which is around you to be positive, to be powerful, to be a source of light and happiness and meaning and blessing to all those that are in your influence. God bless you all. Have a good day with Moshiach now. God willing, 3 o'clock, there will be a class, and we'll continue the Sikha that we started yesterday. And I'll put up the Chumash portion on the YouTube. Shalom uvracha, everyone. Yechia Melech.